following video has been recorded to celebrate TOFT's sweet 16th birthday, and what better way to do that than with a donut pattern. So over the last 16 years of company history, we have obviously changed what we do. We've expanded, the range expands into new crafts, new techniques all the time, but we remain core to our values, and that is to really spread happiness and joy, to enrich people's lives with our combined share of craft, making things, being creative. So with this pattern, you've got an absolute beginner donut pattern. It's a brilliant one to learn to crochet. So if you are totally new to crochet, I hope you enjoy it. If you are more advanced, there is another video that covers all the different techniques used in the toppings. So once you've made your donuts, you can customize them to make someone in your life smile. So let's learn to crochet a donut together for TOFT's 16th birthday. So first, you are going to need some yarn, and the yarn thickness that you choose will dictate how big your donut is. So this one is made with TOFT double knit, this one is with TOFT Aran, and this one is TOFT chunky. So you'd be using a 3mm hook for the double knit, you'd be using a 5mm for the Aran, and then you'd be using an 8mm for the chunky. Choice is yours. The pattern will work with any thickness of yarn. You just need to match that hook size down to make sure that you've got no gaps showing when you're working those stitches. Now I'm going to be working in our Aran weight of yarn on a 5mm hook, and so what you're going to need yarn wise is you're going to need your dough colour, and I've gone for camel here, so quite a nicely baked donut. Our oatmeal works well as well. I've also then gone for my new pink Aran yarn as my main icing colour and my cream in contrast. If you go for one of the TOFT donut kits, then what you're actually going to make is yarn enough to make half a dozen donuts. So in your double knit, you'd need 2 of your dough colour and then 25 grams of each of the contrasting. For your Aran, in order to make a full set of 6 donuts, you'll need 1 of each colour. So 1 of your dough colour, and then 1 of your contrasting, and 1 of your other icing contrasting. So this is a lovely, easy pattern, which is why it's a brilliant one to actually learn to crochet for the first time. And what I'm going to do here is give you the pattern for a plain iced donut like this. So we're going to be starting from our icing colour. So I'm going to be starting from the pink first. And I'm using an Aran weight of yarn and a 5mm crochet hook. Now I'm a right-handed crocheter, which means that I'll be holding my crochet hook in my right hand, and I hold the hook overhand like this. If you can already crochet, maybe you tried the basic stitches before and you're more comfortable holding it underhand like that, then stick with what is most comfortable for you. Don't feel like you need to change that. And what we need to do before we do anything else is tie a slip knot. So to tie a slip knot, you need to create a circle like that in your yarn. Then you put your fingers in through that circle and you grab the tail end of the yarn, but you don't bring it right through. You just hold it like that and then draw it through to create a slip knot. And a little tip from me with this one is to leave a lovely long end on the beginning, because we're actually going to use that end to sew the center of the donut closed at the end. So long length, create a slip knot. So you leave a nice long tail, and a slip knot is a knot that is controlled to open and close by the tail end of the yarn. So what you then do is you pop that onto your hook, and don't pull it too tightly, but you want it to be quite close to your hook like that. So then the first stitch that we're going to learn to crochet will be the chain stitch, and that's how this one begins. And what we're doing is we're going to be creating the chain that forms the center of the donut. So to do a chain stitch, you're holding your yarn in the position that's most comfortable, your hook in a position that's most comfortable for you, and I'm holding my yarn in the opposite hand. Now, if you're a left-handed crocheter, you'll just be the other way around. As a right-handed crocheter, I've got that hook in my right hand, and I've got my yarn just like that, relaxed across my left hand. And a chain stitch, you grab the yarn, so bring the hook behind the yarn like that, turn the hook downwards towards you, and you see how I've rotated it forwards towards my body, and then you bring that through the loop on the hook like that. That is a chain stitch, and we're going to need to do 20 to start this pattern. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17 and 18. 19 and 20, so 20 stitches, 20 chain stitches to start off this pattern. Now if you're totally new to crochet and that's the first thing you've ever done, you can't go wrong with doing a few hundred stitches of chain. So what doing the chain stitches will do is get you comfortable with twisting that hook upwards and downwards and both holding your hook and your yarn. So you can always practice with doing as many chain stitches as you want to, because you can always pull them backwards. But to make your donut, you're going to need 20 of them. And then what you do is you curve them round in a chain like that. So do you see when you look at your chain, you've got V's on one side and you've got bumps on the other side like that. Curve that backwards towards yourself like that and put your hook in through the stitch that's close to the slip knot. So do you see your knot is there? You're going to put your hook in through the back of that stitch like that. Then yarn over again. So in the same way as you were doing for your chain. So grab that yarn by bringing the hook round the back of it. And then this time you're going to pull it through that loop and through that loop like that. So I'm just going to show you that bit again, because that's probably the trickiest bit that we're doing beyond doing our double crochet. So you tie your slip knot, leaving yourself a nice long end on, because we're going to use that to close it. You do your 20 chain stitches. Then what you do is you take that chain with the V's facing forwards, curve it round in a loop like that, and put that hook into the back of that stitch. Then yarn over, so grab that piece of yarn and bring it through both of those loops that were on your hook. And then it's time to learn the double crochet stitch. And this is the basic stitch that's used in all of this style of crochet. So once you've mastered this double crochet, you'll be off. You'll be able to make whatever you want to, whether that be animals, dolls, whatever takes your fancy. So the double crochet stitch. What we're going to do is we're going to go round this chain and we're going to double crochet 2 stitches into all of them. So at the moment we have 20 stitches on our chain. We're going to put 2 into each one, and that will leave us with 40 stitches afterwards. So take your hook and put it in through the center of the V like that. So you're going to put it in through the center of that chain. Then grab the yarn, so yarn over. And with that hook again, it's me grabbing that yarn by turning it downwards towards myself. Bring that back through to the point where you've got 2 loops on your hook. Yarn over and through those 2 loops in one motion. So that's 1 double crochet stitch, or a DC. Then what we're going to do is go back into the same hole. So do you see how that stitch is attached to that one there? Go back into the same one and work a second one. So that's doing 2 double crochets into that first chain hole. So go into this next one, into this chain, you go into the middle of that chain stitch like that. Yarn over, bring that through that chain to the point where you've got 2 loops on your hook. Then you yarn over and come through the 2 loops in one motion. So that's 1 double crochet, back in again and do a second one. So that's now me on 4. On to the next one along, in again, 5 and 6, and you go all the way around that chain, just working those double crochets, 2 into each one until you have 40. So you'll go right round that chain, working 2 double crochets into each of those stitches, and it will go frilly and curly like this. And that's because you're increasing lots of stitches into that original starting chain. So when you get to working your last one, so that's my last double crochet, which would be my 40th stitch, what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a little bit of contrast yarn. Now you can use a stitch marker should you want to, that you can just put in there and then remove it each time you go around. But I actually find it much easier to use a tracking contrast piece of yarn to mark my round ends. And this is so you know where you're going, because from now on we're going to be working non-stop in the same direction on this circle, and you need to know when you have completed 1 round or 1 full rotation of the pattern. So just pop that into the last stitch you worked like that as a contrast piece of yarn. And then the next line of your instruction will say to double crochet 10 rounds on these 40. And what that means is you're just going to work 1 double crochet stitch into each of these stitches, and you're going to go 10 full times round. So let's have a look at what that looks like. So you take your hook, you're going to go this time in underneath both sides of that stitch. So when you look at the edge of this, you'll see the V's there. That's the stitches. You put your hook in beneath both sides of the V like that, and then you're going to double crochet. So the stitch that we were doing on the first round. So you go in, yarn over and through to the point where you've got 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and through those 2. And rather than going back into the same hole to work anymore as we did do last time, this time we're just putting 1 into each of these stitches. So you go on to the next V along like that and do a double crochet, then onto the next one along like that and do a double crochet, and you're going to go all the way around putting 1 DC into each of those stitches. So you go right the way around like that. Now, as a right-handed crocheter, as you can see, I'm moving in this direction. So I'm moving on the screen effectively right to left. If you are a left-handed crocheter, you'll be going the other way. So you'll be moving the opposite way around this circle direction-wise. You don't need to change the pattern in any way or worry about that. You're just constructing it as in mirror, effectively. But I never refer to right and left in the pattern. It's always to do with your hook hand and your yarn hand. So you'll just be working that direction around the stitches rather than in the direction that you see me doing here. So you go right the way around until you've done your 40 stitches, and that then would be 1 round, and we're going to be doing 10. But what we're going to do is we're actually going to change colour from our icing at some point to our dough. And this is where the choice is really yours. So with this cream chunky one that you can see in front of me here, I've done 3 rounds of icing before I've changed to the dough. And that means that my icing is sitting in the centre top, ready for me to maybe work some drippy embellishments onto that icing later. The one that's in front of me here is a 50-50 one. So that's where I've done 5 of the rounds in the icing and then done 5 of these rounds in the dough. So let me just get right the way round, back round, and I'll also then show you how to do the colour change. But most importantly really is to know where you are. So once you've double crocheted 40 stitches, you'll see we're getting back round to that piece of yarn stitch marker that is there. And all you need to do once you get there is work that last stitch, and then you can just put your hook down again into that last stitch that you've done, and you can bring that piece of yarn up with you, and that then will track all of your round ends. So you've done 1 round of 10. So you're ready to go do exactly the same thing again, where you're double crocheting into each of those stitches. So I've now done 3 full rounds on my icing colour, and I'm ready to swap to my dough because I'm going to do one like this where I've got icing just creeping in on the top. Now, if you're a fan of the classic original donut, you obviously don't need to use an icing colour at all. So one like this, what I've done is I've started with my dough colour. I'm not going to do a colour change at all, and then I've actually worked additional embellishments to decorate them in the contrasting colours, so I've done it all one colour. But if you want to add icing like this to do your kind of classic glazed donut, what you're going to need to do is do a colour change to your dough colour. So to do a colour change, what you need to do is you put your hook into the next stitch along like that. So again, beneath both sides of the V, exactly the same way as you have been doing until now. You yarn over in that colour that you're using, and you bring that through the stitch to the point where you've got 2 loops on your hook. So that's exactly what you've been doing as part of your double crochet so far. But stop then at that stage where you've got 2 loops on your hook, and what you're going to do is get your dough colour, yarn over with your dough colour, and actually finish that stitch off using your dough colour rather than your icing one. And then all you need to do is snip off your original icing colour like that. That will then go inside. So when we're stuffing and sewing this up, that end will go inside. So there's no need to tie that in any way. You can just leave it loose like that. You don't need to sew that end in afterwards. And then all you're doing is you're using your dough colour from then on in. So just to recap the pattern, we chained 20 stitches to begin with. Then we double crocheted 2 into each of those stitches to get up to 40 stitches. And then we're working 10 rounds just doing 1 double crochet into each of those stitches right the way around. Then the final thing that we need to do is to do a decrease back down to 20. So I've got 3 in my pink here before I've swapped to my dough colour to do the 4th one. I'm now going to do 6 more rounds in my camel, and then we'll do the DC two-tog, or the invisible decrease. So once you've done your 10 rounds of double crochets, and as I said, I've done 3 of the icing and then I've done 7 of the dough, it's time for a round of decreasing, and that'll be the end of crocheting the main body of our donut. So to do the decrease, or the double crochet 2 together, this technique will be invisible on the right side of fabric, and it will be quite visible on the wrong side of fabric. But this is the outside of your donut. So on the outside of your donut, you should be able to see straight lines like that. Whereas on the inside of the donut, it looks quite different. You'll see them running vertically like that away from you. You should be able to count the rounds that you've crocheted in straight lines like that. So the double crochet 2 together, or the decrease, to get us back down to 20. What you're going to do is, whereas before, for the rest of it, we've been crocheting right the way beneath both sides of the V like that, what we're going to do is come up in the middle of just the front half only like that. So do you see how I've got the hook through the inside of the V from the front side? Then take your hook back down, and in the same motion, get the half of the next stitch like that. So you've got the 2 front halves of the next 2 stitches on your hook. Then you're going to double crochet through those 2 as if you were going through a normal stitch. So yarn over and through those 2 to the point where you've got 2 loops on your hook, yarn over and through those 2 in one motion. So that's a decrease, a double crochet 2 together. So you've worked that one. Now we're going to be working the next 2. So you go up through the front, through the middle of the V, back down and through the middle of the V on the next one like that. So you've got 2 halves, and then double crochet through those 2 halves. So we had 40 stitches, which is what we've been doing those 10 rounds on. We're now going to turn that back down to 20 by doing this decrease method through all of them. So one right the way around, and that will be your donut completed, ready for sewing up. So once you get to your final decrease, you'll have 2 stitches left like that. Put your hook, again, exactly what we've been doing before, to do that final double crochet 2 together like that. And then all you need to do is snip your yarn, and you don't need to leave a long length on this end because we're actually going to use our icing end to sew it up. So snip your yarn like that, and then you just continue to pull that loop right the way through, and that fixes that off, so there's no way that can unravel. Now with your stitch marker, you can just pull that out because we don't need that anymore. That's what we've used to mark our beginnings and ends of each round. And now it's time for some sewing up. So for this part, you will need some stuffing. I'm using a recycled plastic polyester stuffing, which we do have available, but you could use anything to stuff it. And you're going to need to stuff around the edge of your donut, but leave a gap through the middle. So when you're stuffing it, stuff the sides, but you need to leave that gap through the middle for us to sew those 2 start and finishing edges together. Now with your dough end, so with the end that was the bottom of your donut, you can just tuck that in. There's no need to sew it in, you can just tuck that in because that is secure. And then we're going to use the icing starter thread in which to sew it together. Now, if you didn't leave yourself a long enough thread to do this, you can always reattach a length of yarn at this point in order to do the sewing up. And what we're going to do is we're going to go through the middle and to the other side of the dough and go through a stitch like that and pull that tight, and then go into the next stitch along like that. So do you see I'm just going through the middle of the V, back towards our icing, and then we're going to come up through the middle of one of those stitches. And that is all you are doing. Is you go into the next stitch along in your icing, go through the middle and back down onto your dough and through the next stitch along, and just pull them nice and tight as you go round, because that's what's going to seal your donut up and retain that kind of hole in the middle that is that classic donut shape. So go all the way around that edge as I have just done there. So keep going up and through that one, along the next icing along and back through the dough, and you'll find that comes together nicely. Secure off your last few stitches once you get to the end, and to secure off an end of yarn, the great thing is with this style of crochet you can hide all those ends in. So all you need to do is go in through, and then I'd go round a couple of stitches. So come round a stitch once like that, go through again and come around another stitch, and you can snip that off. And that is your basic donut completed. Now, if you're happy and you don't want to do too many extra frosting pieces, then let's put the eyes on now, because that would be your donut finished. If not, refer to the other video, which covers lots and lots of different frosting options, so that you can finish your donuts to make a totally different selection should you wish. But if you want to put the eyes on at this stage, what you're going to need is a length of cream and then a length of black. And when you're sewing the eyes on, you want the eyes to be straight despite it being a curved donut. So that's all that you've got to bear in mind, is you want your eyes to be straight rather than necessarily in line with the stitches, because obviously it is a round. So take your yarn and come up through the stitches like that. And do a couple of wraps. Now I'm using a double knit weight of yarn here, so a thinner yarn to sew these eyes on. You could use the same thickness of yarn that you've been using, so an Aran, or you could obviously even go for safety eyes should you wish. Just make sure you put those on before you do the final sewing up. So I've done a couple of these there in the cream yarn, and then I go across the other side, and I've been putting them about 8 stitches apart. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 stitches apart like that. Then this is the bit that's important, is make sure you come up in a straight line again, rather than following the slant of the stitches. So put yourself in another little cream triangle like that. And then for the finishing touches that just make it a character. Obviously you don't need to add the eyes at all if you just want to use it as play food, and there'd be no need to add those eyes in. So using a black contrast yarn in the same way, but this time we're going to add a little mouth in. Come in with your black like that, so not to the top of where the cream is, about 2/3 up of where the cream is on that first triangle that you've drawn in the cream. Then do 1. I'm going to probably do 3 wraps in this double knit on the Aran, like that. 4, I think actually I'll do 1 more there. Then I'm going to come across and do the pupil on the other side. So come across through the middle of the stitches like that. 1, 2, 3, to keep them even on both sides. Just make sure you use the same number of wraps as you did on the first one. Then to put in that cute little smile, I've built mine onto the same round as the bottom of my eyes. So come through again onto the same round at the bottom of the eyes, and then I've just done a little line across 2 stitches like that to put in a smile at the end. And there you go. That's your donut absolutely completed. Now, if you want to start to talk about glazings, and I'll just show you a few of the options here in terms of putting sprinkles on, in terms of doing some drip icing, in terms of adding lots of little extra decorations onto your donuts, see the other video to talk a little bit about glazing.